Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. So in this video we are going to be reviewing Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. So ahead of the release of the new rebooted animated movie within the Scooby Doo universe, Scoob, coming later this year. It's delayed a little bit because of the whole coronavirus stuff, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to look back at the last Scooby Doo movie that was released, which was Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. It's such a shame that a third movie wasn't created because it was actually such a good franchise. It had a brilliant cast, so much charm, really hilarious moments in there, and just tons of nostalgia as well. It's just such a shame that the critics slated the first and second movie, which led to the third one eventually being cancelled, which is just such a shame because thus far all we've received really is just animations within the Scooby Doo world. And here we had a brilliant live action universe within the Scooby Doo world. So it's just such a shame that it kind of didn't end up being as big as they wanted it to be, and as much as it deserved to be, because in my opinion it was really good. And I'm going to break down exactly why I think that in this movie review. So throughout the run of the Scooby Doo cartoon over the last 50 years, by the way, can you believe Scooby Doo's been running for 50 years? Absolutely incredible. But anyway, over those 50 years, there's kind of been two main story techniques within the franchise. The first one is kind of murder mystery solving in terms of who's behind the mask, who done it type storylines. And then they've kind of been the real life monster and ghouls type storyline in terms of running away from these crazy creatures. And within this movie, similarly to what they did with the first one, they've kind of combined these two together. So it's kind of a mixture of kind of who's behind the mask, murder mystery, kind of whodunit type storyline telling, as well as real monsters and ghouls kind of being out there in the open that the public have to kind of run away from and that are kind of scaring and terrorizing everyone. So kind of because of the fact that it's got both of these attributes within the film, it kind of just makes the storytelling really, really exciting. You've kind of got the kind of guessing who is this person that's kind of the mastermind behind the whole thing, as well as kind of like the exhilarating monsters and ghouls kind of being out there in the open. So, you know, from that point of view, it's really, really cool. And then on top of that, it's just hilarious as well. Shaggy and Scooby predominantly, you know, the other characters are funny as well, but Shaggy and Scooby just are absolutely hilarious, literally laugh out loud moments. So, you know, overall from a storytelling point of view, this film is absolutely killing it. So in terms of the actual plot of the movie, Fred, Daphne, Velma, Scooby and Shaggy head back home to Coolsville to go to a museum where there's a special exhibition in their honor whereby they are showcasing all of the monsters that they have captured and stopped over the last 50 years. Now in this exhibition, while it's kind of going on, while everyone is celebrating them and all of that kind of thing, a masked figure comes in and captures two of the costumes and then kind of runs away with it. And then it kind of leads the film down a path of kind of working out who is this masked figure. The gang have to kind of fix their reputation because at the event their reputation has kind of gone down. They're kind of perceived to not be as kind of great as back in the day, so they're kind of re-establishing themselves. Shaggy and Scooby are kind of also proving themselves to the group to kind of showcase that they are kind of mystery solvers as well, so they kind of have their interesting own storyline as well. So just a hilarious kind of run with loads of clues, loads of kind of whodunit situations, kind of loads of different characters that you're trying to work out. Is that the masked figure? Is that the masked figure? Is that the masked figure? And just kind of overall a fun trip down memory lane. So the characters and actors in this movie are just absolutely brilliant. I honestly feel like they've done such a good job in terms of casting all of the characters in this movie. The five main characters are just brilliantly played. The actors that they chose are just spot on. They literally do lift and shift them from the cartoon onto the big screen. So I think they've done a brilliant job in terms of casting the main characters. And then they've added great actors as well into this movie as well. So for example, Alicia Silverstone is in there, Seth Green is in there as well. It's just such a great cast, and I just feel like that's another reason why I just feel like it's a shame that a third movie didn't get kind of commissioned, because the casting was just so good within the Scooby Doo live action remake. But yes, anyway, so let's go through them one by one. So Fred is played by Freddie Prinze Jr., a great casting for this character. I just feel like his character is just a little bit weaker than all of the others in terms of character development. He doesn't have that much character development, which is a shame. His journey is definitely relatable and is definitely really interesting. So for example, he is used to kind of being the leader of the group, getting a lot of praise, kind of being the solution finder. And in this movie, it's an interesting journey in the sense that he gets a lot of bad press. His leadership position is kind of put into question. He's kind of feeling a little bit insecure in terms of not being able to solve the mystery and just kind of having a bad light on the group, and is kind of feeling really sorry for himself in this film, and then kind of having to kind of pick himself up and to kind of get the job done effectively. So like I said, it definitely is relatable. I just wish that they kind of went into a bit more depth with this character, because it is a great character and it could have been even better. But you know, that said, the Fred character is really interesting. Sarah Michelle Gellar plays Daphne, another brilliant casting choice. She really brings this character to life, and she kind of does it in a great job, in the sense that this character typically, in the cartoon at least, was perceived to be a little bit of a damsel in distress. Later on in the season, this wasn't as much of the case, but at least in the first couple of seasons it definitely was. And in this film and in the first film, it definitely was a bit of a flip in terms of this character really being able to defend herself. And in this film as well, she's kind of the linchpin of the group. She really helps Fred with his insecurities and also helps Velma with her dating dilemmas. So yeah, she's a really, really cool character in this movie. We then have Velma, who is brilliantly played by Linda Cardellini, and she kind of goes on a really interesting arc about accepting who you are. Like I said, she goes on a really cringy date where she tries to be a bit more like Daphne, who is really cool as a character, but obviously isn't Velma. And Velma was trying to be a bit like Daphne, and then it wasn't really authentic. And then she realised that, you know, that if she isn't Daphne, then maybe she doesn't deserve to go on dates and all of this kind of thing. And her story was really interesting in terms of accepting who you are. She's also the scientific brain of the group, and also helps Shaggy and Scooby kind of accept who they are, and the fact that they don't need to prove themselves, and the fact that they are kind of being perceived through Velma's eyes as, you know, being free spirits. And that's kind of really endearing. And, you know, kind of going through all these characters right now, I'm actually realizing that it's actually a lot deeper than, you know, the comedic Scooby Doo kind of movie franchise that you would kind of think the franchise is all about. But actually, these characters do go on really relatable and really interesting journeys throughout the movie. So next, let's look at Shaggy. So he is brilliantly played by Matthew Lillard from Scream. This one, out of all of them, was just the perfect casting. He just really does bring the Shaggy character to life. And actually, that is a hard character to play. Someone super goofy and still kind of being lovable at the same time. And kind of the way that he's perceived in the cartoon is just a very over-the-top, very eccentric type character. And Matthew Lillard honestly steps up to the plate and brilliantly plays his character and really does bring him to life. He's absolutely hilarious. The comedic moments, he totally like gets them and really does kind of make you laugh out loud. Does a brilliant job with that. But in terms of the, I guess, the deeper sense of the character, he's kind of trying to prove himself and trying to show to the group that, you know, he can contribute, and ultimately kind of wants to prove his worth, which, like I said, is a super relatable quality. And then finally we have Scooby, who is voiced by Neil Fanning, and he goes on a very similar arc to Shaggy in the sense that he kind of wants to prove himself. He kind of has that best friend relationship with Shaggy as well, and has some hilarious moments as well. But the voice actor really does kind of capture the essence of Scooby from the cartoon as well. Absolutely hilarious moments in there. I won't spoil them for you, but if you watch the movie, you'll just not stop yourself from laughing out loud, because they're absolutely brilliant moments in there as well. And then from a character's guest point of view, there are also the Big Brothers, who are just brilliantly bringing the musical score to the film. They did a special song for the film as well, which is absolutely brilliant, and just really makes the end credits kind of come to life. But they also have songs in the movie as well, so they are just a brilliant choice to kind of have as guest stars in there, and just kind of really made the early 2000s really representative through the casting choices in this movie. So in terms of the visuals, it's a bit of a mixed bag here. So Scooby looks really, really good. And the rest of it, you know, I think if you would bear in mind the fact that this movie was made almost 20 years ago, some of the CGI kind of monsters and some of the action sequences haven't necessarily stood the test of time because they just look really, really bad, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But that doesn't mean that it takes away necessarily from the movie. It's still a very charming, comedic movie, and actually, you know, if you look at it from a different point of view, it can actually add to the humour in terms of how bad some of the CGI moments are. So from a visuals point of view, you know, don't necessarily expect kind of like the best animation, the best effects, the best CGI that you've ever seen, especially if you're going to compare it to kind of like brilliant animation and brilliant CGI movies out there, for example, like Avengers Endgame, etc. Then, you know, obviously it's not going to be able to hold up. But, you know, from a visuals point of view, it's kind of okay in some moments, but then really bad in the other moments. So it's kind of balanced, I suppose, from an overall perspective. In terms of comparison, Scooby Doo is kind of its own unique thing. So you can't necessarily compare it to that many other movies or any other brands necessarily. I guess, you know, if you compare the first one to the second one, I'd say they're pretty equal. Typically sequels have a hard job of kind of stepping up to the plate after the first movie, but I would say they're kind of both on par. As we've said in this review, you know, there's great character development in this movie. The storyline is really, really cool. The casting is absolutely stellar. So, you know, it does really hold up in the brand for the movie. In terms of the entire franchise, my favourite incarnation within the Scooby Doo world is the short-lived TV series Mystery Incorporated. Such a shame that this series didn't get more seasons. It had 2 seasons, which is really, really good going, but it was just definitely the best incarnation of the Scooby Doo brand. I'll just give you a 2-second summary of it. It's basically a bit of a darker take on the Scooby Doo world, with an overall narrative throughout the entire season, an ongoing storyline, ongoing kind of romances, ongoing kind of rivalries and kind of different groups, and a bigger storyline, a bit like, you know, the Thanos Infinity Saga kind of thing within a TV season within the Scooby Doo world. So it was such a good season. So if you haven't seen Mystery Incorporated, highly recommend seeing it, because that's my favorite incarnation of the Scooby Doo brand. But in terms of this movie, I'd say it's kind of maybe the next best after Mystery Incorporated, and it's kind of equal going compared to the first movie. Overall, I really enjoyed Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. If you haven't seen it before, I would highly recommend seeing it, because it is a fun movie. Brilliant casting, great storytelling, great character journeys, a great overall plot journey, great reveal, kind of just an overall fun ride. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Such a shame that a third movie wasn't commissioned in the end, because it would have been a nice kind of continuation to this brilliant kind of world that they were setting up. I believe, from what I've read, that in the third movie they would have flipped the perspective of actually the monsters being the innocent ones, and the people that are kind of after the monsters are the real villains. So it would have been an interesting flip on kind of perspectives, discrimination, all of that kind of stuff. Now that we come to think about it, Scooby Doo the movie franchise does kind of tackle interesting issues, which is really, really cool. But yes, I would recommend seeing it if you haven't seen it before. And kind of, you know, like I said before, the visuals don't necessarily stand up, but it is still a fun and charming movie that you should definitely check out if you haven't seen it already. And for all of those reasons, I am going to give Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed a solid 6.5 out of 10. I'd love to hear what you think, so please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.